Hello and welcome back. In our last lecture, we have installed our Python virtual environment, created a virtual environment with a directory called vinv, and we also tested out our Python setup and also installed our first package called OpenAI. Now in this lecture, we're going to create the backend of our service, and this service is going to take a customer review and generate a response by calling the OpenAI API. So let's start off, create a function. So let's think about what this function gonna do. So this function is going to take a review and then extract the response. So that's the very simple task of this function. So let's start off and do this. To do that, first we will need to import our OpenAI package for sure, and then let's create this function. So what this function do is get customer review and generate response. So I'm going to call it get customer service response, and it will take in a review, which is a string type. And now let's try call our using the OpenAI endpoint. So what in order to use that, we're going to do OpenAI check completion. Remember that we're going to use the check completion endpoint and create. So in this case, let's select our model. I hope you still remember the parameters of in our earlier introduction. So this model, we're going to use GPT 3.5 Turbo and the messages. Remember, in the check completion API, the endpoint requires the messages, which is an array. And in the first one, we're going to specify a row. The first row is going to be the Simpson. And so what would the Simpson say? Let's start off by testing whether the API is working. So let's just make it very simple. I'm gonna say act as an AI, and then the second row is the user. So the content is maybe because this is a test, so I'm going to say hi, I'm Jeremy. And also let's set a temperature for it. I'll go with 1. So this is equals to the API call. If you go to the implementations, you'll see this create function is actually calling the parent create function. And in the parent create function, it's actually using the requester to do the request and do the post request. So that is equals what we have seen in the Postman, where we do the post request with the parameters and the authorization. So this is actually a wrapper on the post request. Now let's get back. So this will give us a response. For starter, let's do nothing, just purely return this response and test out whether this is working. So let's call this function in the main. The review actually doesn't matter, so I will give anything. Let's get the response. Let's just simply print out the response and check. And now let's run the program. I'm going to do Python main.py again. Oops, so there's an error. So here, okay, so this is a dictionary. And okay, user, okay, cool. I forgot to add the content here. Content. And the quotes. Cool. Let's run again. So no module named OpenAI. Let's check out why. So OpenAI is installed and which Python. Alright, now let's test this out. So I'm going to run this by calling Python 3 our file min.py. Okay, so we hit our first error. So looks at no API key is provided. You can set your API key in code using OpenAI.api or from the environment variable. So clearly remember that in the Postman earlier, when we call the OpenAI endpoint, we also need to provide the your API key in order to set up the authorization. Hopefully you still remember your API key and put it somewhere. Here also prompt us to set up our API key using this. So we can just put our API key here, OpenAI API key. Which equals, I'm going to copy my API key here, which is this one, format this, and let's run this again. Okay, cool. Looks like the connection is working. And the content generated by the assistant, which is a result from GPT-3, gives us, hello Jeremy, it's nice to meet you, how may I help you today? It works exactly the same as we have done in our Postman. So now we have tested the connection. Now we can continue and create our review. To do that, we actually need a prompt in order to get the result that we want. For this one, I'm going to use this prompt. Let's create a prompt. Which is this one. So I have pre-drafted this prompt. Let's take a look at this prompt. At this moment, I hope you will be very familiar how to draft a good prompt and what are structures of a prompt. So this prompt said extract a sentiment and generate a reply to the following customer review. And the sentiment should be only in 3 kinds: negative, neutral, or positive. And I also require specify the output. I require the response to be in JSON format with sentiment and the response as keys. And I also give the example. And lastly, we put in our review. Now let's update our response prompt and incorporate this one in. So to do that, I'm going to change the instance. So for the instance, I'm going to tell ChatGPT, okay, you are a customer service that is nice and patient. So we set the context to GPT, and then the user content is going to be changed. I'm going to use our prompt and format with our review. So look, review is going to equals review. What this does is going to replace this placeholder. We created a placeholder, so this is the review, the variable that will be input from the user. So we will replace this review with the actual review provided by the user. And now call this again. And now the function input actually matters. Let's create some random review. For example, I'm going to say this product is amazing. I'll put in here. I think that should be working. Let's check this out. Alright, let's check out what's the response. Cool, so it gave me a content from our assistant said sentiment is positive, which is absolutely yes, because I said the product is amazing, and also give us a response to the customer. We are thrilled to hear you that you're enjoying our product. Thank you for taking the time to give us this amazing review. Cool, amazing, this is working now. Before we move on, every time when you finish function, the first thing before moving on is always to refactor your function. So I think the thing here is a little bit clunky. I'm going to put this prompt into a separate function so that it will look clearer. So to do that, I'm going to create another function called a format prompt, which takes in a review, which is a string, of course. And I'm going to put the prompt here. Let's give it another name. Put it here, and I just return this formatted prompt. Format review equals review. And now I will only need to call this function. I'll delete this one and call the function format prompt with our review. So now the function looks more concise, and each function only complete a single task. Okay, format this, and let's run this again. Let's check this out. Again, the sentiment is positive and also get a response, so it's working. Cool. Since we're going to do this Python 3 main, this command a lot, I think it will be nice to put it into a makefile. So I will create another file called makefile. And I will put in the command, maybe just call it run. And this command will simply be python3 min.py. And now we can use make run instead of python min.file. Cool, it's working out. Now we have created our first major function that it takes in a review and reply with the analysis of both the sentiment of the review and also a very kind and nice response. Now let's take a break. I will just see you in a minute.